Look at me. No, do not look at the portrait they painted of me. Do not look at the caricature the history books created. Look at the skin. Look at the clarity of the bone beneath the velvet. They say time is a thief. A silent, relentless beggar that sneaks into your bedchamber while you sleep and steals the bloom from your cheek, the fire from your eyes, and the elasticity from your limbs. They say even a countess, a woman who owns the mountains, the valleys, and the very lives of 10,000 souls, must eventually surrender to the rot of the grave, that we must all become withered, grey husks, bowing to the indignity of decay. I say, they are merely poor negotiators. Time is not a thief. Time is a merchant, and like any merchant in the markets of Vienna or the bazaars of the East, it accepts payment. But time has a sophisticated palate. It does not want the cold clink of gold florins or the sparkle of stolen diamonds. It wants something far more precious, something warm, something vibrant, something that beats with the frantic energy of the young and the foolish. It wants the currency of life itself. Welcome to Csejte. Do not complain of the cold. The Carpathians have no warmth for the weak, and neither do I. I am Elizabeth of the house of Báthory. To the peasants who shiver in the mud below my walls, I am the Blood Countess. To King Matthias, I am a debt he can never repay, and a power he can never control. But to you, I am the only woman in the history of this wretched world who had the courage to stay beautiful forever. People ask when the madness began. They love that word. It is a comfortable cage they build to contain things they cannot understand. But I was not born of madness. I was born of iron. My blood is older than the crown of Hungary. We have ruled these jagged peaks while the rest of the world lived in the dirt like swine. My lineage is a map of conquerors, mystics, and defenders. I grew up in an age where the ground was always red. My husband, Ferenc Nadasdy, the Black Knight of Hungary, spent his life carving a path through the Ottoman hordes. He did not bring me jewelry. He brought me the silk banners of fallen pashas and the stories of how a man's spirit leaves his body when the steel is sharp enough. Blood was the atmosphere of my youth. It was on the floor of the great halls. It was on the hands of the men I loved. It was the scent of the very air we breathed as we held back the Turk. Why should I fear it? It is the most natural thing in the world. It is the river of our existence, and I simply learned how to divert the flow. The mirror and the crack. It started with a moment of triviality, a clumsy girl, a peasant whose name I never bothered to learn because she was no more significant to me than a single blade of grass in my meadows. She was brushing my hair. It was a Tuesday, a grey, miserable morning where the fog sat heavy on the battlements. I was looking into my mirror, a mirror of polished silver framed in ebony, and I saw it, a line, a faint, cruel shadow near the corner of my eye, a crack in the porcelain, the first signature of the thief. I felt a coldness in my chest that no fire could warm, the terror of the mundane, the fear that I, a Báthory, was being reduced to the same fate as the hags in the village. At that moment, the girl's hand slipped. She pulled a single strand of my hair, just one. In my fury, an imperial fury that knows only absolute obedience, I turned and struck her. I hit her across the face with the back of my hand, my heavy rings catching her skin like tiny claws. She bled. It wasn't much. A spray of red, bright and searingly hot landed upon my bare arm. I called for the guards to drag the girl to the dungeons for her insolence, but as I reached for a cloth to wipe the stain from my skin, I stopped. I looked back into the silver mirror. Where the blood had touched my flesh, something impossible had happened. The skin beneath the red was different. It was paler, tighter. It glowed with a vitality that the rest of my face lacked. The dull ache of the morning seemed to vanish where the droplets had rested. I sat there for hours, watching the blood dry into a dark, rust-colored crust. I realized then that the girl's life had not been wasted. It had simply been redirected. She had no use for that vitality. She was a servant, born to work until her back broke and her skin withered in the sun. What better use for her youth than to offer it to her mistress, to the garden that deserved to bloom? That was the night the diary truly began. I realized that my beauty was a sanctuary, and like any sanctuary, it required a sacrifice to remain holy. I realized I didn't need the prayers of the church. I needed the dew of life. The School of Shadows. I was not a butcher. I am a woman of intellect, of order. I am a Báthory. If I was to harvest the essence of youth, I would do it with the grace of a queen. I opened a school, a gyneceum at Csejte. I sent letters to the lesser nobility, the families who were desperate to have their daughters seen at court, to have them learn the arts of lace-making, music, and etiquette. Send them to me, I wrote. I will polish them, I will make them into jewels. And they came in carriages, draped in their best wool and silk, their eyes wide with the hope of a future they would never see. Their parents kissed them goodbye at my iron gates, weeping with pride that their daughters were to be the companions of the great Countess. They were right to be proud. Their daughters were becoming part of something eternal. They were becoming part of me, the peasant girls. They were easy. They were like the cattle in the fields, disappearing into the cellar without a whisper. A fever would take them, or a wolf in the woods. No one questions the death of a servant in 1604, but the high-born girls. They were the vintage wine. Their blood was educated. It was refined. I remember the basement. Do not think of it as a dungeon. Think of it as a laboratory. The air down there is thick, metallic, and ancient. My loyal shadows, Dorothea and Ilona, they understood the divinity of the work. We didn't just kill, we extracted. Have you ever seen the Iron Maiden, a masterpiece of German engineering, a hollow shell of a woman crafted from silvered steel, lined with long, thin spikes? When a girl is placed inside and the doors are slowly closed, she does not die quickly. No, the spikes avoid the heart, they avoid the lungs, they are designed to draw the liquid slowly. She weeps, and her tears are red. They flow through the channels of the machine into the silver basin where I wait. I would sit beneath it in the cold dark and let the warmth rain down upon me. I would close my eyes and feel the centuries falling away. Every scream was a second added to my clock. Every drop was a stitch in the tapestry of my immortality. I was the weaver, and they were the thread. Act 4. The Crimson Liturgy. The legends say I bathed in it. They imagine a tub filled to the brim like a vat of wine. They have such vulgar, clumsy imaginations. They think of it as a bath of excess. It was not a bath, it was a liturgy. I would enter the chamber at the stroke of midnight. The silence of Csejte would be absolute, save for the wind shrieking through the high battlements. I would strip away my titles, my heavy brocades, my pearls, and my pride. I would stand there, naked and vulnerable, in the center of the stone room. And then the ritual. The liquid is not like water. Water is thin, cold, and indifferent. This is heavy. It is viscous. It clings to the skin like a lover who refuses to let go. It holds the heat of 1,000 stolen summers. As I stepped into the basin, I could feel the strength of those girls, the vitality of the dancers, the breath of the singers, entering my very pores. I could hear their dreams, their unlived lives, all being consumed and digested by my own ambition. I was not a murderer, I was a vessel. I was the altar upon which their mundane, forgotten lives were sacrificed to create something that could defy God himself. I was the moon, and they were the stars that had to be extinguished so that my light could be absolute. 650, that was the tally they found in my journals. 650 keys to the House of Time. Do you ask if I regret it? Does the sun regret the darkness it displaces? Does the fire regret the wood it turns to ash? No, I am Elizabeth, and I am beautiful. Act 5. The Silence of the Stone. They came for me in the winter of 1610. Georgi Thurzo, a man who had eaten at my table, a man whose family owed mine everything. He broke into my sanctuary with his soldiers and his morality. He found the girls in the cellar. He found the records. They could not execute me. You do not behead a Báthory. It would be an insult to the very foundations of the kingdom. So they gave me a different kind of death. They took me to my highest room in Csejte. They led me inside, past the mirrors I no longer needed, and then they began to build. Stone by stone, brick by brick, I watched the world disappear. First the mountains, then the forests, then the light of the moon. They walled up the windows, they walled up the door. They left only a tiny slit for air, and a sliver for the meager food they deigned to give me. I have been in this room for, I do not know. Is it years? Is it centuries? Time is a strange creature when you are held within 4 walls of cold stone. But here is the secret they never understood. I am still here. They tried to erase my name. They tried to burn my diary. They tried to turn me into a ghost story to frighten children. But you are listening to me, aren't you? You are thinking of my skin. You are feeling the phantom heat on your own arms. I achieved what I set out to do. I escaped the grave. I do not live in a tomb. I live in your nightmares. I live in the crimson of every rose, in the heat of every heartbeat, in the vanity of every woman who looks in the mirror and fears the dawn. The walls are thick, but the blood always finds a way out. Sleep well, little lamb, and pray that you never hear the sound of a silver pitcher pouring in the dark.